My name is Maren Lattimore, and at 42, I have learned that silence is often louder than shouting. Years in operations taught me how to keep a company running while men like Blake Hensley collected the applause. I never needed to win arguments, just results. But that morning, in the glass-walled conference room on the 23rd floor of Hensley Dynamics, even I felt my pulse rise. Blake leaned back in his chair, the kind of posture that said he owned not just the seat, but everyone forced to sit across from it. The son of the CEO, newly acting executive, wearing that permanent half-smirk that made every word sound like a threat disguised as charm. "Is thank you that hard?" he asked, drumming his fingers against the table. "You're here because of me." He had said it after taking credit for a contract I had salvaged, one that saved the company nearly $2 million in penalties. He wanted a performance. I gave him silence. I reached for the envelope beside my notebook, thick ivory paper. Edges crisp, weight deliberate. When I slid it toward him, the sound of it against the table was clean and final, like a verdict. "What's this?" he said, still amused. "Read it." I answered. He tore the flap open, expecting some report, some apology. His eyes moved once across the page, then again, slower. The color drained from his face. "This," his voice cracked. "Secretary, get our lawyers on the phone." Now, the room fell still. Outside the glass walls, the office kept humming, unaware that power had just shifted. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and gathered my pen. The weight in my chest lifted not victory, just release. Blake was still shouting when I reached the door. 3 days earlier, I had still been the woman who fixed other people's mistakes. Now, the paper he held was about to remind everyone who had truly kept this company alive. The morning after the contract crisis broke, the air at Hensley Dynamics felt charged, brittle. Word had already spread. Operations had pulled off a miracle. I had spent 72 hours straight untangling the vendor mess that could have cost us nearly $5 million. The penalty was erased, the client retained, and the finance team could finally breathe again. Blake called a quick debrief. The entire department was summoned. He wanted witnesses. He strolled into the meeting room 5 minutes late, latte in hand, shirt sleeves rolled high to show off his gym routine. "Well," he said, flashing that performative grin, "looks like our little fire got handled." He turned to me. "Good initiative. Maren, you took my idea and ran with it. Love to see that kind of hustle." I looked up from my notes. "Your idea." He laughed lightly, eyes scanning the room for support. "Yeah, the call I made last week about renegotiating timelines. I said it, don't panic. We'll find leverage. You delivered. That's teamwork." One of the analysts coughed, trying to hide a smirk. I kept my tone even. "You weren't on that call, Blake. I was negotiating while you were in New York pitching to a brewery client." His smile hardened. "You know, that attitude right there. It's what holds you back. I give you room to prove yourself, and you treat it like an insult." I could feel eyes flicking between us. Everyone pretending to take notes. "No insult taken," I said. "Just clarifying facts." He leaned against the table, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You're here because of me. My father kept you on because I vouched for you when the restructure hit. A little gratitude wouldn't kill you." The words landed like a slap, sharp, rehearsed. He straightened. Louder now. "Anyway, great save. Team, let's keep that energy up. We're only as strong as our leadership." "Right." Applause followed, half-hearted and awkward. As people filed out, I stayed seated, my hands still on the folder of contracts I'd rebuilt line by line. The company I had once believed in was shifting under my feet, and I could already feel the cracks forming in the foundation of respect that used to hold it together. When Hensley Dynamics was still 3 rooms above a coffee shop in Cambridge, there was no talk of legacy or optics, only survival. We printed our own shipping labels and shared one printer that jammed twice a day. The founder, Thomas Hensley wore the same corduroy blazer all winter and made payroll by negotiating grace periods with suppliers. Back then, he called me the spine of the operation. One night after another 16-hour shift, he slid a thin envelope across my desk. "Employee stock ownership plan," he said. "We can't afford big bonuses, but this paper, if we make it, it'll mean something." I remember laughing. "If we make it?" I repeated. He smiled. "Paper doesn't shout." Maren, but it never forgets. When the company finally did make it, when the headlines called us the quiet giant of logistics automation, people forgot that paper. Most early employees cashed out when private equity came knocking. I didn't. I told myself I'd hold on to it, just in case. Years passed. Leadership changed. Thomas retired. Then his son took over. And those shares became nothing more than a folder in my file cabinet, gathering dust beside old pay stubs and half-dried pens. Until now. That night, after Blake's meeting, I went home, poured coffee instead of wine, and dug through the cabinet. The folder was still there, creased, stamped. My name spelled wrong but still valid. 2.6% ownership. Not much on paper, but in a company fractured by new investors, it could still tilt a scale. I called Eleanor Pierce, a former company paralegal who now freelanced from her townhouse in Somerville. "Do you still have access to the old filings?" I asked. "Depends who's asking," she said. "Someone who never sold." A pause, then a soft laugh. "You might be the last one. Maren. Everyone else took their payout years ago." "I know." "Then maybe it's time that paper stopped gathering dust." Her words echoed Thomas's, years apart but somehow identical. I looked at the faded signature and thought not for the first time that silence could be its own kind of power. Eleanor didn't waste time with small talk. The moment I arrived at her kitchen table, she was already surrounded by stacks of old filings, her glasses sliding down her nose. "I pulled everything you asked for," she said, tapping a folder. "Capital raises, board minutes, proxy agreements up to the last Series D round. Blake's name should start appearing around that time," I said, "when his father started mentoring him." She smirked. "Mentoring. Sure, that's one word for it." We worked through the papers in silence for nearly an hour. I marked each page where Blake's name appeared beside the words proxy allocation. They were supposed to show that smaller shareholders had transferred voting rights to him temporarily. But as I traced the signatures, something felt off. "Look here," I said. "These signatures, half of them aren't notarized." Eleanor leaned closer. "And this one," she added, "dates after the proxy expired. That's sloppy or intentional." The name of one investor jumped out at me, Robert Chen, an engineer who had left 5 years ago after selling his stake. Robert's proxy was supposed to end once he cashed out, I said. Eleanor nodded. Then this entry using his name after the sale means Blake was claiming votes from a ghost. She flipped through another set. "There's more. 2 other proxies signed by people no longer on record. Either someone forgot to clean up the paperwork, or someone didn't want to." I felt a slow pulse behind my ribs. "How many votes are tied to these?" Eleanor ran a finger down the margin. "About 3%, give or take. Enough to fake a majority block if no one's checking." I sat back, staring at the numbers. The whole hierarchy, his swagger, his false authority rested on that illusion. Eleanor closed the folder carefully, like it might explode. If those proxies were never ratified, he doesn't control anything. "You realize that?" "Right." I met her eyes. "Not yet, but he will." She smiled faintly. "Then I suggest you make a copy of everything before it vanishes." By the time I left her house, I knew exactly what I was holding proof that Blake Hensley's power was built on ghosts. The office after 10 p.m. has its own language, computer fans humming, vending machines sighing, the occasional click from the motion sensors. I was the only one still there, or so I thought, until I heard the faint shuffle of shoes down the hallway. "Still working?" a voice asked. I turned. Darius Wells, one of the finance analysts, stood by my door holding a slim manila folder. He was quiet, polite. The kind of person most people forgot was in the room until he spoke. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, setting the folder on my desk. "I'll deny everything if it comes up." I opened it. Dozens of line items, red circles around vendor names I didn't recognize. Evernorth Consulting, Blue Ridge Logistics, Myrna Holdings. Each one linked to payment approvals signed by Blake himself. "These aren't real," I said. "They're real in the books," Darius replied. "Problem is, none of them have physical addresses. They bill, they get paid, they disappear. How much about $600,000 in the last 2 quarters? I felt heat rising in my face. "You're sure?" he nodded. I cross-checked against tax IDs. 2 of them trace back to a company Blake's college roommate registered in Delaware last year. The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. "You shouldn't have brought this to me," I said. "It's dangerous." He shrugged. "I figured you'd know what to do with it. People trust you." "That's a mistake," I said softly. "Trust can get you fired." Darius looked tired, older than his 20-something years. "Maybe. But someone has to keep a record of what's real." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, my dad used to say, if you can't sleep after signing it, don't sign it." I haven't slept in weeks. When he was gone, I stared at the folder, the neat columns of numbers that could ruin lives or save what was left of the company's integrity. My hands shook as I made copies. Darius had just put his career in my hands, and mine in the crosshairs of Blake Hensley. I met Lena Cho at a compliance conference 5 years ago, back when I still believed rules existed to protect people. She was the keynote speaker sharp, unshakable, the kind of woman who could dismantle a boardroom argument with one clause. I hadn't seen her since. When I called, she didn't sound surprised. "You wouldn't reach out unless something's burning," she said. "It's smoldering," I replied. "But it's close." We met at a small cafe near South Station. She arrived in a gray coat and a look that suggested she already knew more than I'd told her. I slid a flash drive across the table. Proxy misuse, fraudulent vendors, and a false majority built on expired authorizations, I said quietly. All of it tied to Blake Hensley. She didn't touch the drive right away. "And you still hold equity." 2.6%, I said, unencumbered. Her brow lifted slightly. "Enough to activate the minority shareholder audit clause if your evidence holds. Meaning, she said, stirring her coffee. "Once you file this, his authority freezes automatically. No spending, no executive orders, no personnel changes. The board must review before he touches another dollar." I leaned back. "You're sure I wrote the original compliance framework for Hensley Dynamics 3 years ago? I know what's buried in it." Her certainty steadied me. "Then I'll do it." She nodded once, then reached into her bag and pulled out a blank document template. "Write the activation letter carefully. No emotion, no adjectives, just facts and timestamps. Keep your name on record as initiating shareholder." For the next hour, we worked side by side. I dictated dates, figures, cross-references. She shaped them into precision. Every word felt like a small incision clean, deliberate, irreversible. When I signed, Lena capped her pen and said softly, "Once this is filed, you can't take it back. I'm not planning to." I said. She handed me the document. "Then you've just drawn the line. Make sure you're ready to stand on your side of it." I folded the papers carefully, feeling the weight of everything that could no longer be undone. By Friday night, the office was nearly empty. The only sounds were the faint hum of the servers and the low hiss of the rain against the glass. I sat in the glow of my monitor, aligning the final document into a single, perfect folder every timestamp, every scanned signature, every discrepancy cross-referenced twice. The printer on the other side of the room sputtered as it spat out the last page. I slid it into the ivory envelope and pressed the flap down firmly. The glue stuck to my fingertips, warm from the heat of my hands. That envelope had more power than Blake Hensley would ever understand. I placed it in my bag. It felt alive, like a current pulsing beneath the leather. behind me. The reflection in the window caught my face. Calm, almost unreadable. But my hands betrayed me. They shook when I reached for my pen. I flattened my palms against the desk until the tremor stopped. The phone on my desk buzzed with a new message. Darius, they scheduled your review for Monday at 8:30. Mandatory attendance. I typed back, thanks. I'll be there. He replied almost immediately. Be careful. Maren, everyone knows they want you out. I stared at the screen before locking the phone. They can want whatever they like, I murmured to myself. At the far end of the floor, the cleaning crew wheeled their carts in. The faint smell of bleach drifted through the air, sterile and sharp. I packed my laptop, turned off the lights, and walked the long corridor alone. In the elevator, my reflection stared back again. The fluorescent light harsh against tired eyes. I whispered, 3 days, just to hear my own voice steady. When the doors opened to the lobby, the security guard nodded. Working late again, Ms. Lattimore. Last time, I said, outside. Boston's drizzle clung to everything gray, cold, patient. I pulled my coat tighter and walked into the rain, the envelope pressing against my side with every step, as if reminding me that silence was no longer a refuge. It was a weapon waiting to be used. Monday morning arrived with the kind of cold that seeps under your sleeves. The conference room smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Blake was already there, leaning against the table like he owned the air itself. Morning, Maren, he said brightly. Glad you could make it. Punctual as always, love that about you. I took the seat across from him, my bag resting at my feet. He gave me a once-over, as if checking whether I'd wilt under fluorescent light. So, he began, flipping a pen between his fingers. Big week ahead. We've got the audit follow-up, investor calls, and this little performance chat of ours. Don't look so tense. It's just feedback, constructive. Of course, I'm not tense, I said. He smiled thinly. Good. You've been a loyal soldier. Maren, Dad always said you were dependable. But things are changing. New era, new energy. We need people who adapt, people who appreciate the opportunities given to them. I stayed silent. He mistook it for hesitation and pressed harder. Look, I know last quarter was tough, he continued, but I've done my best to keep you where you are. You'd be surprised how many folks upstairs wanted you gone after that budget dispute. I fought for you. He leaned closer, voice low. Is thank you that hard? He let the question hang, watching me, waiting for my pride to fold. When it didn't. He sighed dramatically. You're here because of me, he said. Never forget that. The words settled between us, heavy and ugly. I reached into my bag, drew out the ivory envelope, and set it on the table. The sound of paper sliding against wood was soft but final. He frowned. What's this? Read it. He tore the flap open, skimming the first page, then stopped. His smile faltered. His eyes darted across the header minority shareholder audit activation notice, co-signed by 2 board members and legal counsel. The silence stretched until his chair creaked. No, he muttered, voice cracking. You can't. This isn't, but it was. And I had already signed my name in ink that couldn't be erased. Blake's face shifted from disbelief to panic in seconds. Secretary, he shouted toward the open door, get legal on the line now. No one moved. The glass walls made his voice echo, hollow and frantic. I stayed seated, hands folded in front of me, calm in a way that felt almost unreal. He jabbed at his phone, muttering, This is nonsense. It's not binding. It can't be. His thumb trembled as he dialed. A soft chime interrupted him, an alert from the shared inbox. I knew that sound. The compliance server time-stamped every incoming filing. Blake's eyes darted to the screen on the wall where the notification appeared automatically. Audit activation, notice received, timestamp 9:14 a.m. The air changed. Even the hum of the vents seemed to stop. He stared at the screen, color draining from his face. "Who authorized this 2 board members?" I said. "And corporate counsel? That's impossible." "It's done," I replied. "The clause activates upon filing." He slammed his hand on the table. "I am the acting CEO. You think a technicality can strip that away?" I met his gaze. "It's not a technicality, Blake. It's governance. The one thing you never bothered to read." He opened his mouth, but another notification blinked. "Legal department confirmed executive authority, suspended pending audit." He froze. The phone in his hand buzzed. He didn't answer. The door opened and Alan Brooks, the head of compliance, stepped in. "Blake," he said carefully, "we've verified the filing. You're on temporary leave until review. All approvals now route through the board." Blake's voice cracked. "You can't just." Alan's expression didn't change. "You've been locked out of financial systems effective immediately." Blake turned to me, eyes wild. "You did this." I stood, picking up my bag. "No," I said quietly. "You did this when you made the rules optional." As I walked toward the door, the chaos behind me swelled, phones ringing, footsteps rushing, voices overlapping. The same network he once mocked me for maintaining now carried every signature that sealed his fate. When I stepped out of the conference room, the air in the hallway felt thinner, quieter. A few heads lifted from their desks as I passed. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The look in their eyes told me enough. They knew something had broken loose upstairs. Blake's voice still echoed faintly behind the closed door, sharp and desperate, fighting an argument he had already lost. I walked past it without slowing down. At the elevator, Darius appeared from the finance wing, his tie half undone. "Is it true?" he asked under his breath. "It's done," I said. He nodded, exhaling like he'd been holding it for days. "You're not staying, are you?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't do this to take anything. I just needed to stop pretending." He looked at me for a moment, then said quietly, "You did more than stop pretending. You made it fair again." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, pressed the button for the lobby, and met his eyes one last time before the doors slid shut. The descent felt longer than it should have. My phone buzzed when I reached the ground floor. A single message from Lena Cho Clean Execution. "He's out." I read it once, then deleted it. No victory deserved to live in my inbox. The security guard at the front desk, Ted, who always called me ma'am even when I asked him not to, gave a small nod as he buzzed me out. "Take care, Ms. Lattimore," he said softly. Outside, the Boston air was sharp and cold. The sunlight caught the edge of the glass building behind me, flashing across the name Hensley Dynamics etched in steel. For years, that name had meant weight and loyalty and silence. I walked to my car, each step lighter than the last. I didn't feel triumphant, only steady, like something that had been twisted finally straightened itself. When I reached the driver's seat, I paused, hand on the door, and breathed in the thin air. I didn't need to say a word. My shares already had.